Thank you so much, Imam, for this wonderful meal, and I'm so happy to see all of you here. I really appreciate it, and these are difficult times, and I think this story is more relevant than ever. So I'm going to be taking you on a journey, and we're first going to Albania. How many of you in the room know where Albania is? Well, that's a pretty good percentage, actually. And for those of you that don't, I totally get it, because I did not know either when I first started this journey, and I had to look on a map. So if we can have the map up here, and you'll see that it is a small country over Greece. Okay, right, so as you can see, Albania is just a small country right next to Greece. All right, so I want to start out by asking you a question. Something I want you to think about, but no need to answer, except to yourself if you want. So if somebody was coming into your neighborhood, and they were bad people, and they were hunting down your neighbor or a stranger, would you be willing to hide them at risk to yourself and to your family? Now, I have asked that question of myself many times, and I honestly don't know. The people I'm going to tell you about never had to ask themselves that question. They believed it to be their responsibility, the code of honor by which they lived. So to give you some context for these stories, in 2017, I took a class at Oxford University in London, and I mean in England. And when I first got there, I needed to take a taxi, had a very friendly conversation with the taxi driver, and at some point he asked me my name. When I told him it was Shoshana, and he wanted to know what it meant, I said it means rose in Hebrew. He got all excited and he inquired, Hebrew? Like Israel? And I responded, yes, kind of perplexed by his question. He then proceeded to tell me that he was part Christian and part Muslim, growing up in Albania. Then he very excitedly talked about his grandfather, who worked in resistance against the Nazis during World War II. He proudly told me that Albanians hid and saved all the Jews in their country, and that everybody always got along. Jews, Muslims, Christians, Roman Catholics. In fact, Christians would go to their Muslim friends' homes for Ramadan, and Muslims would go to their Christian friends' homes for Christmas. They saw everyone as equal. I thought this was an amazing story, and I started to investigate. To my surprise, I discovered that Albania started out with 200 Jews. At the end of the war, ended with 2,000. They were the only country in the world that had more Jews at the end of the war than less. When the Germans entered, well, and just to add that many Jews came from other countries who heard that they would be safe if they came to Albania. When the Germans entered Tirana, the capital, they set up a puppet government. At the same time, secretly, all citizens were told that they need to save the Jews, and not only that, provide them with fake passports. Further, they repeatedly refused to submit a list of Jewish residents to the Nazis. I felt really puzzled. Here it is that there are so many countries in the world, including our own, where there is so much hatred of the other. Yet here's a small country, one that most people have never even heard of, where the citizens believe and live by a code of honor called Besa, to keep a promise and take care of others in need, even at risk of death to themselves and their families. Besa dictates that there are no foreigners, only guests, and that guests must be protected at all costs. It is central to Albanian life and central to their national identity. After a few years of gathering information, I decided that in order to understand how this could have happened, I needed to go to Albania and interview people whose family members saved Jews during the Holocaust. Last year, I did just that. Soon after my arrival, my guide, Eddie, and my translator took me to the home of Tosi, a Muslim. Tosi burst with pride when I got there. He started playing Israeli music that he had received from friends in Jerusalem. I felt so delighted and experienced this deep connection to being Jewish because I knew this music ever since I was a kid. And as he played the music, going in my head, it's like I wanted to take his hands, pull him up, and teach him the hora, an Israeli dance. Now I didn't do that because I thought it would embarrass him. Then he showed me, very proudly, certificates and medals that his father Bakir received from Yad Vashem, the most prestigious Holocaust museum in the world, in Jerusalem, where they refer to Bakir as righteous among the nations, which is often the designation made by Holocaust museums for non-Jews who save Jews. Tosi proceeded to tell me the family's story. As we sat in the very courtyard of the very house where Avram, a Jew from Greece, was hidden, I could look up to the second-story window and know that's where he lived for 6 months, isolated but safe. In Greece, most Jews were betrayed to the Nazis, but many heard that if they came to Albania, they would be safe, they would be protected. Now, since Avram had a large family, they divided them up into different homes so that they would be safer. As well, and I love this, an Eastern Orthodox priest printed fake Albanian passports for Avram and his family. After 6 months, the Nazis began circling the community. Bakir dressed Avram up as a villager so that they could take him to the mountains to stay with other family members. As the Nazis approached them as they were at the base of the mountain, they had with them a translator and said, "Go over to that group and find out if there are any Jews there." So he went over to the group, he talked to them, and came back to the Nazis and said, "Oh no, they're totally fine, they're just villagers." But he knew that there was a Jew amongst them. And now what a relief that they could now safely go up the mountain. Avram stayed with the family for a year until the war ended. At that time, Avram's father kissed the hand of Tosi's father, thanking him for saving his son's life, saying that he will never forget them. When the war was over, Bakir saw Avram taking something out of his pocket. He asked him, "What are you doing? We don't want your money. We did this for Bessa. We did this for honor." After the war, the communists took over the country for 30 years, a very difficult time in Albania. And they wanted the Jews to stay because they thought that they were clever people. Avram spoke several languages, and at 25 years old, he did stay, and he was an economist. He later defied the Nazis by moving to Israel and living until age 91. Now, when we say defy the Nazis wanted to wipe the Jews off the face of the earth. But here, Avram, he's 91 when he dies, but he had children who had children who had children. And so instead of what the Nazis wanted, we then multiply. So they felt, this was an unusual thing, that they were often called a Jewish family, Avram's family. No, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused here. Okay, so people in the neighborhood referred to Bakir and his family as Jewish, even though they were Muslim, because of how they protected the Jews. They felt honored by this and took it as a compliment. Years later, Tosi promised his dad to carry on his legacy so that what happened will not be forgotten and hopefully won't be repeated. Hiding Jews in plain sight seemed to be a common theme. An Albanian woman I spoke to in California told me that her grandfather had a shop where he sold food, and he hid 2 or 3 Jews in the shop. So they worked in the back of the shop and helped in the store, and one day her grandfather decided he wanted to ride his horse and go over to former Yugoslavia, and he wanted to take one of the Jewish men with him. So he dressed him up in local clothing as if he were a villager, and off they went. They went over to Yugoslavia, they bought and sold food, they came back, and nothing happened, and they were fine. And it was just an example of hiding in plain sight. The next day, we went to visit Ayet in an incredibly beautiful old town called Berat. So I'm just gonna wait for the next slide. So that's Ayet, and what you saw very briefly there was the town. Now, when the war tore on through nearby countries, a young Jewish man found Ayet's family. This young man felt so scared that he would not even tell them his name. So the shopkeepers called him Boy. They wanted to hide him in their homes, but he said, no, I feel so much safer being in the back of the shop. So he worked with the blacksmith during the day, and at night, they made a bed for him and then gave him some food. He stayed there from 1943 to 1944. All the craftsmen in the neighborhood were in this together. No one spied, no one disclosed. During this time, the Nazis checked some nearby houses, but fortunately never went and looked in the shop. This was just, and you know, when he did go to leave, he was asked by Ayet's father, who gave him some money, could you please just tell me when you get to your destination and where you are? Well, he never heard from him again. So he figured he was that they had probably found him and possibly killed him. And the thing that touched me was they actually never knew his name. As Ayet spoke, he kept referring to Bessa, and that it meant to just be nice, to just show kindness. Sounds pretty simple, right? It was just a natural behavior passed down from generation to generation. When they saw a local family taking in a Jewish family, then they did the same. You come into my house, I will take care of you. In the beginning, Jews came from Spain during the Inquisition. They would go work at the port in trade, where there was actually a street called the Jewish Road. Then we went to visit Fatima, who had a similar story. Her grandfather, Suleiman, met a family of 7 in the street. They said they were homeless, but he knew they were Jewish. Of course, he showed them hospitality and kindness and invited them into his home. His children played with their children. The grandmother fed them and cleaned them. They became like family. Now the people in the neighborhood again referred to Fatima's family as those of the Jewish family, even though they were Muslim. They also took this as a compliment. They felt proud that people would call them this. She then mentioned Bessa, nobody telling on anyone. She said that even if you didn't like some people who lived in your neighborhood, they would never disclose that you were hiding a Jew. It was against the code of honor. During the communist era, they weren't allowed to talk about what happened during the war. Suleiman did tell his son, and no one else. When the country became independent, they had gone to Israel, and then later came back to say thank you. Also, eventually, Suleiman received a certificate from Yad Vashem that Fatima so proudly displayed. Then Eddie took me to visit his best friend, Gladiola, whose family has lived in their house inside a 4th century castle for 6 generations from the mid-1800s. First, she gave me a tour of her house, including old photos and mannequins wearing traditional clothing from those times. The house felt so sturdy and impenetrable, and you had to walk up quite a distance uphill to get to the castle and the house. She told me that a family down the road was hiding Jews for 6 months. And at that time, 8 Germans came to her grandparents' home and said, we are going to move in here for the next 3 months. And of course, the family had no choice. They were frightened, but the grandmother had to feed them and keep house for them. And she was pregnant at the time with Gladiola's dad, and she actually delivered while the Nazis were still there. Now, of course, they did stay those 3 months, never knowing that there were Jews living down the block. She repeated what was often said, that even if you disliked your neighbor, they would never report that anyone was hiding a Jew. It would break the code of conduct of Bessa, and they would be disrespected. In anticipation of these conversations, I prepared a series of questions. I never had to ask one of them. They were so eager to tell me the story of not only why they saved the Jews who were living in Albania in the beginning, but all these Jews that came from other countries. As I reflect on the interviews and these wonderful, gracious people, I ask myself again, would I have the courage to do what they did? I still don't know. I so admire those individuals that do not question, but just do it. But in this case, it was different, because it was not just individuals, but a national consciousness, a cultural institution at Bessa that emphasizes aiding and protecting people in moments of need. And the world should take notice. Now, we're going to travel, I'm not done yet. We're going to travel from Albania to Sarajevo, Bosnia, and you'll see the connection. While Jews were being protected from the Nazis in Albania, in Sarajevo, something precious was at risk, the Sarajevo Haggadah, a rendition of which is read during the Jewish holiday of Passover. This beautiful Haggadah is from 1350, one of the oldest in the world, taken out of Spain during the Inquisition, eventually ending up making its way into Italy, and in 1895 it was sold to the museum. Now, how is this story connected to the Albanian stories, you might ask? While the Albanians were hiding Jews from the Nazis, at the museum, the staff were afraid that the Nazis would come and take the Haggadah. The museum's chief librarian then risked his life to smuggle it out, going up to a mountain village to meet with a Muslim cleric who risked his life to hide it inside a Quran until the war was over, when he returned it to the museum. And as many times as I've told that story, I still get the chills. It's just amazing to me. So you can see the connection. When I was in Sarajevo, I bought a copy of the Haggadah, and I have that copy here with me. And I'm very happy to show it to you when we're done. So again, I have to say, the world should take notice. So I want to open it up for questions. But I know one of the questions is going to be, what's the origin of Bessa? So I'm going to tell you that. So I had to look it up, and it was traced back to the 1400s, when there was unrest between tribes in this very turbulent region. As a result, there was a need for a strong social contract, some central principles of society. The Albanian chieftain then created laws to regulate social, economic, and religious lives, as well as traditional customs and cultural practices. Hence, the establishment of Bessa, keeping one's word and taking care of others in need. So, I can take this off now.
No, leave it
No,
on.
I guess not. Okay, I'm gonna take it off.
And can you stay behind the podium
Stay behind.
so we can capture you?
Am I not behind the podium?
Yes, but you mentioned you might wander.
Oh, okay, I'll stay behind the podium. No wandering. Okay.
Well, you
First,
can hear
I'd
me,
like to.
okay. So first of all, I have a wandering mic, so I can wander a little bit
Oh, okay, when people have questions.
and get questions from them, so everybody can hear it when he's recording.
Okay,
So that's a good thing to do.
perfect.
And I have to say, this is my comment about tonight, I don't remember how to say the word.
Which word?
The word that you just described.
Oh, Bessa.
We experienced this evening that.
Yeah. Yes.
So thank you again for that.
And Bessa is spelled B like boy, E-S like Sam, A, so Bessa.
Bessa. Oh,
Right.
it's like my grandma Bessa.
All right, so I would like to open up for questions, and then after you ask your questions, I have some questions to ask of you. Okay, so let's start. Anybody have any questions?
I will come to you.
Gentlemen up there.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I know a little bit about Albania. I just read a book about it.
Oh, good, you have to tell me about it.
Yeah. So small population, small little country and it sounds like some of these people that you got to know, that they're descended, their families have lived there for generations.
Yes.
Has there been much, did you get a sense, has there been much movement of people in through the area and thus perhaps influencing or trying to change the culture or not, and therefore the culture of Bessa was able to stay intact?
Well, I think that the concept of Bessa is still really important, but I do have a feeling that it will change in some way. I did ask the question a few times, that what about the younger generation? And wanting to know, is Bessa something that they ascribe to? And I got the feeling, it sounds like they learn about it a little bit in school, and that, but it might not be as prominent amongst the younger generation. Yeah, I know. But hopefully they can keep some of that going. So. Anyone else? Question? Yes?
You did explain what the book is, it's on the picture, but at one point where you was a little too fast. And you said it was in the museum and then it was hidden in a Quran up on the top of the hill.
Right.
What is the name of that book?
It's called the Sarajevo Haggadah. And Haggadah, H-A-G-A-D-D-A-H. And it is the book that we who are Jewish read from, and there's different renditions of it, but read from on the holiday of Passover. Yes.
I'm pretty loud. There is a wonderful book called The People of the Book by
Yes.
Geraldine Brooks, and
Yeah.
it is a historical novel exactly about how this book came to be written and taken care of. So it's been on the New York Times bestselling list for a long time. It's a wonderful book to read.
Yes, I have seen that. Thank you.
What's the name again?
People of the Book.
People of the book. Yes.
I was in Albania last year.
Oh, really? Can you use a mic? Because I want everybody to hear what you have to say. Thank you. Go ahead.
I was in Albania last year, and I know that everyone had horror stories about the communism regime and the Hoxha. What happened to the Jewish population? Were they just considered communists like everyone else?
I think so.
Yeah.
That was my impression.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
it sounds like they, at least from what I was told, that they encouraged the Jews to stay. And I'm sure the Jews had as much difficulty as everybody else under the communist regime. I didn't hear anything about them being treated any differently than anyone else.
No, I didn't get that impression.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. A couple over here.
Thank you so much. A quick question. The Nazis were brutal in so many ways, and they would do two things. They would offer rewards for families or for people to give up the Jews, and they would kill families and all their relatives when they found those families were harboring Jews. It's amazing bravery on a whole people to do what they did. I'm like in goosebumps thinking about that. were there any, and they were brutal in every way, we all know this, I mean, you know, and for them to come in, they didn't come in like nice people and live there, they came in, they took over, they did all sorts of horrible things. Were there instances where they captured Jews, or were all the Jews able to be saved somehow?
Well,
It's a
it's-
miracle, really.
Yeah, it's interesting, if you look it up on the internet, you know, where you, and this is what I was told by people in Albania, that they saved all the Jews, and it was about 2,000. They came from all these different countries, you know, from Poland and from former Yugoslavia and Hungary and quite a few different places. But then some places you'll read on the internet that there was one Jewish family that the Nazis did get. But that's not how the story was told to me. So I thought it might be interesting actually to look more on the internet and try and find out more about that Jewish family. But other than that, we're talking about 2,000 people.
From different countries.
From different countries, you know, it's just, it's still an astounding story to me.
Oh, it is.
And, you know, not only, again, that they did that at risk to themselves and their families, and they didn't really stop to think about it.
So that meant different languages.
That's true too.
Yeah.
That's true too, and, you know, I guess they figured out how to communicate.
What was the breakdown of the different religions? Christians, the percentage, Christians, Jewish, Muslim?
Right, well, the Jewish population was small, so they started off with 200, so that,
That's the call to prayer.
right. Do they wanna,
Go ahead, sorry.
okay.
Carry on.
So, yeah, our Muslim friends will go to the call, or go to prayer, so.
Okay, I just lost track, well, tell me your question again, please.
Oh, just the percentage
Oh,
of
right,
Christians
okay.
and Muslims with a small percentage of Jewish people.
Yes, I
200.
don't know the number, but that's something, I'll check that out the next time somebody asks me that question. But my impression was that the larger population was Muslim, and then Christian, but I don't know how it broke down, and then the smallest, and then there were Roman Catholics also. There were quite a few churches in Tirana, I know that, and mosques when I was there. Any other questions? I'm on this side.
Is there still any Jewish population?
Small. There's a Chabad there, of course. But it wasn't open when I was there, because I really wanted to talk to them. And I heard they're building a museum, and there is a memorial, small, but it's a memorial to the people in Albania for saving the Jews. Any other questions?
Somebody have their hand over here?
Can I? Yes,
Sure, go ahead, Soria.
thank you. Thank you, I just want to make a point, I think Mother Teresa was Albanian,
Oh.
who traveled to India, yes. to-
I'm sorry, who was that?
Mother Teresa?
Oh, I know she was Albanian,
Yes,
yes.
So,
Yeah.
so currently what I know is that more than 50% of the population are Muslims, and about 20% are Christians.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a fascinating study to go deep into this Basam, right?
Basam, yes.
Basam. And I think, if we can all kind of institutionalize that, because
Yes.
things are, somebody has to begin talking about it, even if we don't succeed in institutionalizing it. I think that should be, like the Ubuntu word from South Africa, Ubuntu.
Mhm.
Remember it during the pandemic?
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Shoshana.
Yeah, you're welcome. In fact, in
Moving and-
there is a church there that I was in that has, a picture of Mother Teresa. And from what I was told, she's from there, and then she left to go to India and to do her work. And the communists were in control, and she wanted to come back to see her family, and they wouldn't let her in. So she didn't get to see her family, and of course, they were there for like 30 years. And I think by the time she was able to, they weren't alive anymore. But yeah, it was a surprise to me, I didn't know she was from there. So I think that's cool.
Percy, it's actually stealing your glory a bit, but.
What?
The lady who asked about the percentages,
Yes.
everyone we met in Albania was Muslim. I think there's a small Christian population.
Yeah, I don't know that. I am going to find that out. Thank you.
She has a mission now.
So, per the internet, which never lies.
Oh, good, okay.
It says, before the communists took over in 1944, it was estimated that Albania's population was roughly 1,180,000 people, and 70% belonged to the Islamic sects, while 30% belonged to the Christian sects.
Well, they left out the Jewish
Yeah.
there.
Well, that's such a small percentage.
Just a teeny 0.5% or something. I don't know. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm a little confused when you talk about the Muslims, Christians, and Catholics. You separated Catholics, separate, as I understood what you were saying, from Christians.
Yeah, it seemed to me as I was being taken around Tirana and we went into a few churches, and there were the Roman Catholic churches, and there was other Christian churches, and that's why I say them separately like that. And if it's not accurate, because to be honest, being Jewish, I don't always know or understand the differences of the different groups of Christianity. So, yeah.
We would just say we're all Christians.
Okay.
Catholics and Protestants and LDS.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Just a point, I happen to be Catholic, and Catholics are Christians, so.
Yeah,
We just all worship.
okay, all right, well, I appreciate that point, thank you very much.
It's right next to Greece, so I assume that the Greek Orthodox is the majority.
Oh,
Did you hear Carrie said
No.
it's mixed to Greece, so he's assuming they would be Greek Orthodox, but that's not necessarily true because Mother Teresa was Catholic.
yeah, and I didn't,
Well, the ones that were Greek Orthodox, Catholic probably next largest, and then smaller.
well, we'll check out the populations, I will know that for the next time I do this presentation.
You got a tough crowd.
You're not so tough, it's good.
They're good. Bessa.
I'm just wondering, so I love this Bessa. So it's not necessarily Muslims, it's their national.
It's a national consciousness. It's
Yeah, it's,
yes.
Do you, any idea where they got it from, or just?
Well, that was that part that I talked about in the 14th century.
Oh, okay.
That was,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it didn't have anything to do with the religions, it just was.
No, it didn't sound like it. It sounded like it was part of, you know, changing the identity and having a sense of propriety and behavior, and it included religion, but it was beyond that, society. Anyone else? Okay.
I will say on my way to Keith that if the population was 70% Muslim, this is part of their teaching, and Christians, it's normally part of their teaching. So it was good that they went this direction.
Shoshana, thank you very much for giving your time. As you're talking, the stories that you related have reminded me of a couple of movies that I've seen recently in 2023. One with Anthony Hopkins, a movie called One Life, about a Brit who went to great length to save Jewish children from, was it Switzerland? Yes. And also another one with Helen Mirren and Gillian Anderson called White Bird, which dealt with France. So, okay, great, so we've all seen those movies. And it's just that the story that you're relating is so similar. It seems like this seems to be the topic that's come. It's very timely what you're talking about, although I don't want to put a timetable on goodness. The fact is that I'm so glad that you're telling this story, because there are other stories like this that are coming out, and we need to hear these stories now.
Right, and they're all so different. So even though there would be similarities, you know, like people will talk about Denmark,
yes,
and how the king of Denmark, he did not want to give up Jews to the Nazis, and he managed to make that happen. for the Jews that lived in the country, and then they transported a lot, they were able to transport the Jews to Sweden, get them on a ship, a lot of them. And so, you know, they did some really good things, unlike in this woman I met who's at one of my talks, who was from France, and she acknowledged, you know, the complicity in France in regard to handing the Jews over to the Nazis. But what makes this so unique, I think, is that this was not just the Jews in their country. And you know, so that kind of leads me, I have a few questions, so if you're okay with my asking them at this point. And then if you have more questions, you know, comments, certainly let me know. So was there anything about what you heard in this story that resonated with any stories you've heard in your family? Anybody? I mean, that might not be the case, but Therese?
Well, it does with my own family. It resonates a lot with my family because my family is from Poland, and there were a lot of issues in Poland, and a lot of Polish people were rescuers and also honored by Yad Vashem. When the communists, as soon as the war ended, Poland was given over to the Russians in the pact that was made by the big leaders. So all of my family was raised under communism after being first indoctrinated by the Nazis and so forth. So one of the reasons, as you had mentioned that the topic is timely now, is that Albania also was smothered by the communists. The communists would not allow anyone, at least in Poland, is what I was told, to talk about the war.
Same in Albania.
At all. And so no one shared their stories. And I found out years later that I had family that was killed because they were hiding Jews. And I never knew that. My parents never told me. I found that out much later because they were all afraid to talk about it. So I think that's why we're getting more stories now, because more countries have gotten rid of communism.
Thanks, Therese. Yeah, anybody else have some thoughts about that?
Hurry up, hurry up.
He's the only one that could do that.
It reminds me, in opposition, negatively, of the fact that the United States turned away a ship laden with Jews. I guess it was prior to World War II, during World War II. So just a totally opposite story to what occurred here.
Right, and most of them were taken back to Europe, and most of them were murdered by the Nazis.
Just before, it was in 1938.
Mm.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mom. And what other thoughts or feelings were you experiencing as you were listening to this story?
I love the idea of Besa. I think it's something that we all need, and it's something that we should spread around the world. And as I've been sitting here listening to this, I thought, here are Muslims in relatively modern times, you know, and people of other faiths who are full of humanity. And what do we need to do to spread that to other cultures and other countries that have Muslims and Jews and Christians and all other religions? I mean, how do we spread that concept? Because it's so disheartening. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. So how does that start? With what? A thought? A movement? I don't know.
And the thing we have to remember that was unique about there, you know, if we talk about starting something now, this was part of, this went back to the 4th century. So this was something that was like in their DNA for generation to generation, which, you know, for us to replicate that.
Well, there's so much hatred now.
But there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And so I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story, and I appreciate all of us being able to be here. She's reaching down.
Just to say that I think that one of the most amazing things that we are so kind of impressed by and inspired by the story is that it's Muslim families that saved Jewish families, and to sit in a mosque, and thank you, Imam, for opening your gates, and to hear the story, right? Because it seems like in this world it's kind of a miraculous thing. But I think that the thing, really the precious gem that you're sharing with us through the story, the Bessa, is not Muslim or Jewish. It's humanity, right? The pledge of honor, which is Bessa, it's not a Muslim concept or a Jewish concept. It was an Albanian concept that was rooted in their society and culture, and they inherited and gave it, passed it on from generation to generation. And it really brings us back to the core, like to the very, very beginning, to the creation of the world, when God created people, human beings, before religions were a thing in this world, and were controlled by so many different elements that we are experiencing. It's not them against us. They looked at it as we are all human, we were all created by the image of God, and therefore that's what we do for one another, because that's the basic.
We're all in this together. We're all in life together. Yes. Sakina? Can you speak loud? Or
I can speak loud.
You're an old lady.
I have a bit of a Peace Corps background, so Peace Corps has been in Albania since 1994, and they work mostly with children and youth in action groups. And one of the stories I had just read was about Bessa. And so I know that you mentioned that you're not sure what it's like with the youth, and it might be a little bit, they might have heard of it, but it's not, we don't know where it's going. But a lot of the Peace Corps volunteers said that it's actually very strong, and it's a very nationalist type of movement amongst youth to keep that in the forefront of when they are even, when they're creating rules for like their groups and their communities, they bring Bessa up as their #1 role.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that. I asked that question of everybody I interviewed. So within that group and that organization, I'm really glad to hear that. Around the country, I don't know if that's the case or not, because it wasn't so strong as I was hearing it from the people I interviewed. But that's exciting.
And Peace Corps in the small, Peace Corps volunteers are in really small villages and small areas, so I don't know how it is like in a larger city.
Right. That's great. Thank you, Sakina, for telling us that. Okay, another question I have. So in the beginning, I wanted you to think about how it would be for you if there was somebody coming into your community, doesn't have to be the Nazis, and they are searching down, thank you. They are searching strangers or searching people from your neighborhood. Would you be able to protect people in your home, knowing that it was at risk to yourself and your family? Nobody has to answer, but if you're willing to share, and whatever your answer is, there's no judgment, because this is such a personal thing that, it's whatever anybody personally feels. Yes.
I would think it would be a lot easier in a society where Bessa was practiced, because I think my biggest fear would be endangering my loved ones along with the people that I would be harboring if the next door neighbor let them know that we were harboring. That fear of people that we love being injured because of it.
Right, and whereas if everybody believed in this philosophy, then just like I kept repeating, like they told me, no matter if they were people you didn't like, they would never say anything. Thank you, that's a good point. Yes?
I think that's a good question. I've thought about that, given what's going on these days, and what can I do? And we have a very tiny place. There isn't anywhere to hide anyone. I wonder, given the opportunity, if we would try. But I want to think I would, but we don't ever know what we'll do. But I think it's a really good question for all of us to think about.
Yes.
Well, in the meantime, I haven't had to deal with that yet, and I don't know how
Hang on
to
here.
act. So, thank you. So I think of what can I do? So I go to McDonald's with my granddaughter, and there's a gentleman outside who's asking for food. Maybe other things too, but I assume he was asking for food. So with my granddaughter, we go and I asked him what he wanted, a burger and fries and a Coke. And he bought him a burger, fries, and Coke. And with my granddaughter, a young granddaughter, we went out and bought him this burger, fries, and Coke. So at least I can do something, which may not be bringing something to my home, but I can provide a burger, fries, and Coke.
Well, I think that if all of us did something, that would be a very good step.
And one of those things you can do is if you hear and you're in a conversation or you're in a room with a conversation where somebody is saying negative things about another person, especially if their faith, their race, whatever it may be, that you speak up and say something to stop it. So that's the beginning of BESA, is that we stand for other people.
Thank you. Yes, there's a lady there who might ask a question.
I just wanted to mention that this past weekend, millions and millions and millions of people came out on the streets of our country to protest what's going on. They may not have people hiding in their homes, but they're out on the streets speaking up and fighting back. And I think that's what we need to continue to do.
Thank you. Yes, I think that we're gonna have many opportunities. Unfortunately. Many opportunities, yes.
Shoshana, I mean, I'm just in awe of your courage. You pursued your journey to Albania to come and tell us this story. I think you are a gift, and I want to thank you. We have known each other for over 20 years, I think. And I knew you were always adventurous. So I don't know. I just Googled some like she did. So Besa is a word that inculcated in the culture of this country. It is a word. I wonder whether we have any like that in America. But I also want to say, last year I went to Auschwitz, Birkenau, to the concentration camps. And Birkenau, yes. And as a Muslim woman, it was very painful for me to be there. And I understood that the Jewish people themselves were refugees and the problems. So I don't think enough of us know those stories. And it would be nice for us to hear, want to hear first, and to be able to share. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel really so delighted and honored to be able to tell this story here in this mosque. Number one, it's the mosque that's in our community. And number two, I have felt like I've told this story in churches and synagogues, in an educational Holocaust center, and I felt like, in senior centers, and I felt like it was really important because Muslims are a critical part of this story, and I think most of them don't know it, and it's something to be proud of. So, yes, thanks, Roy.
Any other?
Well, I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. And okay. One more.
Oh, it's Keith or Mars Farr?
Now that you've brought up the topic of, if we saw a group of people that's being persecuted, would we help? One thing is that the people that helped in Albania, they face the death penalty. Okay, that's one thing. As far as helping other groups of people, a book I read a few years ago by Ina R. Friedman called The Other Victims definitely relates to this question here. As far as millions of people coming out and protesting, if it gets to the point where I'm going to face the death penalty for helping people, I'm not going out and protesting and getting my face recognized by the people that may be persecuting me. It's nice we can do this in America, but is it going to spin that far out of control that we'll have to worry about our own lives? And if it does go that way, I'm going to keep I'm going to keep a very low profile as far as my political opinions are. I'm just saying.
No,
I'm
I
just saying
appreciate
But,
that. I mean, we all.
the other victims is a great book on this subject.
Okay, thank you. I know for me that one of the things I've thought of really since this story, and I've thought about this before, would I do this? Because I've read and seen movies, so many about the Holocaust, and people who did save Jews during the Holocaust, would I be able to do that? And I've always felt like I'm just not really sure. But I know in our community, and my friends who are undocumented, that, there's a family that I'm close with that I love, and I've told them, if you have a problem, you can come to my house. And I have felt that more strongly ever since going to Albania and feeling like, maybe I could do this. And I think it felt safer to do that in the United States, although I'm not sure I feel that's true anymore, or at least not at this time. But, it's definitely a very personal thing that everybody would need to decide.
Well, and individuals do need to know, and we don't want to be political, we do want to know the truth, and each of us have our own stance on that.
Exactly.
But we do need to know that churches are not safe anymore, that they're going into churches. We know that the Simi Valley United Church of Christ kept a woman safe there for a couple of years, and that would no longer stand. So we need to be aware of those things in our decision. Something we may not have been willing to do before, we may be willing to do now. So, Shoshana, thank you for this evening.